Great. Uh, well, I have 11 o'clock, so good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for today's session, Mind of the Athlete, Clearer Mind, Better Performance, with one of our alums, Dr. Jarrod Spencer from the class of 96. Going to just give a brief introduction here and then turn it over to Jarrod, who's going to obviously walk us through his presentation. At the end, we will have an opportunity for everyone to ask questions. So please save those for the end. And again, thank you very much for joining us. So this morning, again, we're joined by Dr. Jarrod Spencer, class of 96, sports psychologist, speaker, author. He's passionate about improving the emotional health of athletes, speaks to athletes and leaders across the country, sharing his signature message of clearer mind and better performance. Through educational and entertaining keynote speeches, he equips his audience with the mental skills necessary to manage the emotional sides of sports and life. He was recently on CNN and the BBC and has worked with many of our student athletes over the years. Thank you again for joining us this morning, Dr. Jarrod Spencer.
Josh, appreciate that so much. For each of you that's tuning in, just know that I'm flattered and honored that Lafayette would lower the bar enough to say, hey, maybe you could be one of these presenters at the reunion. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity. I will tell you, like the rest of you, man, I was looking forward to this reunion. This is I see Steve is on here. Steve Kanya, one of my teammates when I was at Lafayette as well. 96. This is our 25th, or was supposed to be. So, Steve, is at least good to see you via Zoom during this pandemic. And so, thank you for being here, Steve, and as well to the rest of you that are joining me. Here's how we're doing it today. We've got about 50 minutes, and I'm not going to do the whole didactic kind of teaching thing. I want this to be like really interactive, so I'm just going to talk for like maybe 15 minutes and lay a little foundation here for some cool stuff. But I really want this to be like us interacting with each other and talking with each other. So that's how we're going to do it. Does that sound good with you? Just nod your head if you're in agreement with that. Oh, yeah. So think of your questions, and we'll get to that in just half a moment. Okay. Having said that, let me go ahead over here and share my screen with you and pull up a little bit of a PowerPoint. Here we go. Whoop, let me do that a little differently. There we go. Okay. So really excited to be with you guys. Man, it feels like, isn't it true? Like when you are an alum, doesn't it feel like it wasn't that long ago that you were really at Lafayette? But this is me, my sophomore year on the football team. That's Frank Tavani off on the right, a very young Frank Tavani, who I'm still in touch with, as well as a handful of these guys as well. So seems like just yesterday we were all on campus, but every once in a while when I try to sprint, it reminds me, oh yeah, it was a long time ago. So everything I do now is about improving the emotional health and performance of athletes. And the reality is it came from my time when I was at Lafayette, understanding how the mind and body are really connected. Professor Alan Childs in particular, hugely influential and allowed me to create a major called psychobiology. My fraternity brothers in Fiji would say, what are you going to do? Hypnotize fish for a living, right? Like who needs a psychobiologist? But Wendy Hill and I as well, she was the provost then, or afterwards, created this major. And it's kind of been the catalyst that put me into this path now as a health and sports psychologist, where I'm really preaching about, man, if your mind can be clear as a mom, as a dad, as a business owner, like whatever it is that you do, it can be done so much better when our mind's clear. But like, how do we do that? Well, there's a gazillion techniques and skills, and I'm going to share a bunch with you today. But it's really important now. If you're coming into this time together with me today, it's probably because you recognize that mental health is really important right now, and the tools in our mental toolbox, which I'm sure we all have, are good enough. Maybe this pandemic has kind of challenged that to say maybe I got to do a little bit more. maybe there's a little bit more I could learn, or maybe I've got a son who's really struggling. If I could really help him out with his own mental health, we could unlock performance a little bit better academically. Whatever it may be, mental health has really had its day. Sports are emotional, and so is life. Life's emotional. But I came from the world of Phillipsburg, New Jersey, where we grew up with the suck it up, don't whine, don't complain, I don't want to hear about it kind of mentality. And what we're seeing now is that it's very different. This movie clip, can you identify it? Who knows this movie clip? And what's the famous line from it? Say it to yourself, right? There's no crying in baseball. No crying in baseball, right? And so, like, we know now, like, it's okay to cry. It's okay to let it flow and go. In fact, Josh had mentioned that CNN interview and talking about how important sports are in mental health. In fact, I'm going to share that interview with you. I'm going to just click over here. It's on Facebook, and share that interview with you as a way to kick off the importance of what's really happening with mental health.
Diagnose Naomi Osaka from here. You can't, even with your experience. So I think we're going to look at the larger issue here, which is people are like, hey, she plays in front of thousands of people for millions of dollars, yet has anxiety over answering questions from reporters. Explain this.
She's human. She's normal. No matter what we do and no matter who we are, so many of us struggle with mental health concerns, especially right now during this pandemic. So what she's saying is what a lot of people are feeling, which is anxiety is really fear of the unknown, and depression is hurt held inward. And she's human. She's normal. She's experiencing a lot of hurt held inward and anxiety, and saying, I need to make some adjustments in my life in order to do this better.
She said a couple of very specific things in her statement. She says she has battled depression since 2018 on and off. And she also says she wears those headphones to help her shut out, I think, a lot of distractions in the world. When you saw that, what did you take from it?
It's a classic sports psychology technique that we often encourage athletes. When you put on your headphones, it's a universal symbol to everybody around you to leave me alone. I'm really focusing on myself right now, and I'm trying to shift my mind into that optimal place where I can perform really well. And so her use of headphones was kind of a passive way to let people know, please stay back. Let me be by myself at this particular moment. I actually think that's a really good way to manage anxiety in this situation.
What could tennis have done, or what can tennis do going forward?
Well, I think the key right there, John, is moving forward. And that is, we've got to really look at the policies in place. We've got to reevaluate mental health. And it's not just lip service, which may come from a lot of individuals. It's really about putting the time in the funding. This isn't just a professional thing. This is at the high school level. This is at the collegiate level, and really even through a lot of pro sports. We've got to put the funding in place to give these young athletes, especially, the emotional regulation skills that they need to manage the pressure, not just on the court, for example, but off it.
There were some players who said, look, we've got to answer questions from reporters. It's part of the job.
Sure.
Does that address the central issue here?
It doesn't, because at times all of us are going to struggle. And there needs to be more socially acceptable outlets for these athletes and for people when they do struggle to say, you know what, I'm really only able to do X, Y, or Z today. I'm not able to do this other stuff. And if an individual was injured, for example, with a physical injury that's more visible, we might give them a pass a little bit more. But for the invisible injuries, often mental health is invisible, people will suffer in silence. We've got to come up with better ways to give them an opportunity to say, it's okay not to be okay, and we're going to let you have a pass here today.
Tennis players, by the way, they're out there alone. They're not like, team sport athletes. Right. They're out there alone, all by themselves.
A lot of pressure.
All right.
We can't diagnose Naomi Osaka from here. You can't, even with your experience. So
pause on that. Go back to our slides over here. All right. So we know that, as we saw with that interview, the time for mental health has come. I'm so excited to just put a little nugget in your toolbox here, tool in your toolbox, and we'll get to the Q&A, my favorite part of our time here together. A lot of times people are like, well, how does the mind even work? Let me just give you a quick snapshot. It's a lot of what's in my my second book, Mind of the Athlete, Clear Mind, Better Performance. I don't care who you are, how famous you are, under stress, we all regress, and it can feel like our brain doesn't even work. This here is my x-ray from a couple years ago, by the way. My brain had shrunk pretty bad, but it's not back all the way, obviously, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it. When a person's preconscious mind gets flooded with a lot of stressors, the preconscious mind is kind of that back burner of the stove. It's the place where the rice is simmering, but the chicken's on the front burner. By definition, Freud said it's a place in your mind where memories are stored that you can easily recall, but they're outside of your immediate awareness. So you're trying to look at me, you're trying to focus on me, but you're having a conversation with yourself about all these random things. That's your preconscious mind. And when it's flooded, that's when you toss and turn in the middle of the night thinking about things, or you've got anxiety or emotionally drained, low energy level, or maybe you said something you shouldn't have said, or maybe the hurt held inward. And so all of that is all factors when the preconscious mind gets flooded. So no matter who you are, when that preconscious mind gets flooded, everybody breaks. And all this emotionally charged stuff comes up. So look at this slide really carefully for a second. See if you can figure this out. Your mind is like an iceberg floating in the ocean. 10% of your mind is your conscious mind, like looking at the screen behind me, the environment around you. The waterline represents your psychological defenses. Those are your skills to keep everything repressed. But the preconscious mind is that first layer of the subconscious mind. Those red dots are emotionally charged life experiences. And time has no meaning here. So for somebody who served in combat in war, that stuff could be right there. And can come up in a millisecond. And that's true for many of us in life with a breakup or with a traumatic experience or a death of a loved one. It can just feel like it's right there. And what happens is when your preconscious mind gets so flooded because you're so busy or so overextended, it wears down your defenses. That's the key. It wears down your defenses. And when the floodgates open, it hooks into your loaded issues. Now, we all got them. I got my loaded issues. And when that floodgates open, I'm the emotionally worst version of myself. Can you think of a time when you've been that in the last year? The emotionally worst version of yourself. Who saw it? What did your spouse say to you at that time, right? Like the emotionally worst version of yourself. And really what we've got to do is we've got to try to avoid this emotional collapse that's happening way too often, I see in the sports world. And that's exactly what was happening with Naomi Osaka. Even though I don't know her, this preconscious mind was so flooded, her defenses couldn't keep it in check. And she said, look, I just got to bow out because I'm emotionally about to break and I don't have anything more. That's what was going on there. So the essence of sports is really this. Go ahead and read this to yourself. Break down your opponent physically, and eventually they'll begin to make mental mistakes. And then, of course, you score and get a goal and get an emotional high, emotional low. And in every competition, there's a moment where you can see the team just kind of give up and give in. And we don't want to see Lafayette Leopards give up and give in. That's why for a number of years, probably like 2005 to 2015, I really was the sports psychologist serving Lafayette Athletics for a long time. Loved that time there. And everything I tried to teach everybody when I was there was, the clearer your mind is, the better your performance can be. And that's really what I'm trying to teach you as well, is that preconscious mind can be clear, you feel better. Okay, Jarrod, I'm with you, but how do I do that? We have to build your psychological defenses. That's the outside in head knowledge. The more books you read, the more YouTube videos you watch, the more you study and learn about the mind, those are all your psychological defenses. Those are your skills. That's part one. Part two is we got to clear out the preconscious mind. And the way we do that is through catharsis. So part one, mental toolbox. How many tools can you get in there? And that's really what I love to do as a sports psychologist. And then number two, part two is catharsis, which basically just means a freeing of repressed emotion. So the more you can let it flow and let it go, the better off you can be. And so this is really a quick snapshot of a lot of what's in this book here, the second book that I wrote. that really explains like, this is how the mind works best. And that's my hope for you, is that you might find something out of that book or this talk I'm giving to you now that would say, okay, I'm learning how to keep my mind clear, because when your mind is clear, whatever you do, it's going to be better. You're a much better mom when your preconscious mind is clear. As a dad, you're so much more fun to be around, right? You can laugh. It's like when you come back from vacation and you're just like, oh, I feel so much better. When your preconscious mind is clear, it's amazing what we can do. And I don't want to see another great person have a fall from grace because the 6 inches between their ears got too taxed, too stressed, too worn out, and it didn't work out so well for them. So I'm going to now pour into you, having given you this little snapshot here of how the mind works best, and what I share as a sports psychologist with Mind of the Athlete. So off with that PowerPoint into the Q&A, and really excited about this. So I would say just unmute yourself. That's one way you could just jump in. Ben, I don't know if you want to be the facilitator of that, or if you just want to have people, or Josh, or just kind of have people put in the chat if you want as well, but let's get to the good part.
Yeah, I think that Ben can allow for folks probably to unmute themselves now, and he's giving us the heads up. If you are not on camera or don't want to come on camera to ask your question, please feel free to drop those into the chat, and I can help to facilitate those. But if anyone has a question, feel free to ask it right now. I don't see any in the chat, but Ben and I will monitor that and feed those along to you, Jarrod, as they might come in. So if someone has a question, feel free to ask. I have one already that I'm thinking about, so I can kick it off, but I don't want to take up everybody's time here. So maybe someone else can ask the first question. All right, I'm going to go for it then. Somebody else can come into play. So what would you say to someone who stands over that putt all day long and can't really bring themselves to focus because they're so worried about, the consequences that will come? As an avid amateur golfer, I tend to get in my own head quite a bit. So what are some tools that you can give to somebody who's not a professional that might help before they get onto a golf course or go out there to enjoy themselves on a day?
Yeah, I would tell you specifically, Josh, it's time to put the golf clubs away and pick up pickleball. Such a better sport. A lot of fun. It's more laid back. You probably haven't played it before, so there's no pressure, expectations. So as an amateur, no, not amateur, as a novice pickleball player, I would say, yeah, maybe we want to switch sports.
Sounds good. Okay.
But in all sincerity, the kiss of death for all athletes is as soon as we start focusing on the outcome and not the process and technique. And that's a very simple concept, but it's very profound in application. And so when our minds can be focused on like our footwork and our hand position and our grip and the angle and the lie of the ball and the tilt of the breeze and the sun and all these variables. So I would say, if you haven't watched the movie 7 Days in Utopia, as a golfer, it's the best sports psychology movie out there, along with the movie Peaceful Warrior. So 7 Days in Utopia is basically the story of a professional golfer who lost his mojo. He ends up in the town of Utopia, meets Robert Duvall, who gives him 7 days, teaches him 7 sports psychology skills. He finds his game again. It's really about the mental side of sports, and I believe this would be a great one for you and any other golfer out there.
Awesome. Sounds great. So we do have some...
Jarrod, what was the second movie you mentioned?
Peaceful Warrior.
Oh.
Story of a college gymnast, and he gets injured, and he's got to come back, but he realized the comeback is all mental, not physical. And he meets a wise old mentor there, and Nick Nolte, I think, plays that mentor, and it's really again a profound movie of application of sports psychology techniques to life.
That's great. Thank you. All right, the questions are starting to come in via the chat now, so I'll try and monitor those. We'll stay on the topic of golf here, just with Martha's question. What do you think Tiger's biggest challenges will be upon his return, if he can make a return, I guess, right? So,
Yeah, great question. Of course, I don't know Tiger. I've never worked with him. I don't really know a lot of what's going on there. Um, when it comes to Tiger and when it comes to any athlete, especially in the kind of the twilight point of their career, a lot of it is really the physicality of it. And a lot of emotional stress gets manifested into physical symptoms. So if you are really stressed, there's probably one part of your body that seems to like harbor that stress the most, right? And so for Tiger, because of such significant injuries that he's gone through, his back, for example, and now with the car crash, I would be curious with the physicality, how the emotional stress manifests in physical symptoms, and how when he gets fatigued out there, does he experience pain a little bit greater? Is it amplified? And does that take him away as distraction? And so the mental side of the management of that, I believe, is going to be a critical piece um, in his effectiveness in his coming back. He can certainly come back, but how effective is he on the course? I think that's the wild card.
great.
Sorry to jump in. Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Sure.
Apologize. Like, maybe it's not the Tiger scenario, but how about like recovering from injuries? Not the Tiger, but anybody recovering from a major injury.
A lot of times we have to protect ourselves from ourselves. And in the athletic world or the world of high performance that I really work in, our mindset is, all right, the doctor says it's going to take me 6 to 8 weeks to get back. All right, I'll probably try to do that in 5 to 7. Like, that's just that mindset that comes. And it's like, we have to protect ourselves from ourselves. We've got to be able to say, let the concrete harden. We've got to really value rest and recovery, which too often in American culture, we don't. As a sports psychologist, that's one of the biggest problems we have, is that it's all about go, 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 push, push, push. And a lot of times it's like, how about take it easy? How about slow it down? How about allow the body to heal? And how about really valuing all the rest and recovery modalities that we have to offer? And that's really becoming more in vogue now. So that's one key part, is like, can we do floating? Can we do massage? Can we do cryogenics? The freeze kind of tanks I'm talking about. Can we take a vacation? Can we go someplace away, other, where we can just really relax? Can we do a lot of water therapy, hot tubs, cold tubs, a steam room, saunas, pools? Can we do all these other things that kind of help us kind of recover and come back, but keep our minds as positive as possible? You see, positive emotions heal the body faster than negative emotions. And so whatever we can do to put ourselves in a good emotional place and not rush it, allowing the concrete to harden, I believe this is a much healthier approach for longevity and return to play for any athlete or any person from an injury. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Lee, for that question. I have a few more in the chat, and hopefully a few others will come off mute and ask those questions. Martha just had one more here. Any advice on the best way to help a recent grad who really just focused on football, nothing else except for football, I guess, and transitioning into the real world and not the NFL as anticipated prior to an injury?
Yeah. This is the athlete in transition phenomenon. And it's an area where we're in athletics, we got to do a better job. Now, two amazing young men that I mentored, Max Wessel and his buddy Cody Ferraro, have a company called InX Athletes. And this company is really focused on this specific matter. They focus on it a lot more from the business side, helping them get a job, but it's also part of the mental side. How do I know? I'm associated with it. And if you'll forgive me, please, these amazing young men went to the best safety school in America that I know of. It is a phenomenal school. If you can't get into Lafayette, it's definitely the school you should go to next. And so they're Lehigh grads. Can you believe that? And yes, I got to tell you, I've worked at Lehigh over the years as well. And I love my Lehigh colleagues, friends, family over there. I just tell them, I want you to go like 10-0 every year until the weekend before Thanksgiving. And if we're 10-0 and you're 10-0 and then we knock you off, that's the ideal season for me. That doesn't go over very well there, by the way. Um, so we've got to focus more on the mental side of the athlete in transition because it's really an identity process. And I'm going to share this story with you because it's kind of relevant to the Lafayette reunion in this question. I really struggled at Lafayette my sophomore year. One play, one hit, wasn't even looking. Lafayette Lehigh, 93 football game. Got hit in the back of the head, knocked unconscious, and went to the hospital. It was my third concussion. And back then, we didn't really diagnose a lot of concussions, and we returned to play pretty quick. We just didn't know. So if I was knocked out in a Princeton game on Saturday, but passed the math questions on Sunday, I could practice on Monday. That's just kind of the way we did it. But I couldn't shake post-concussive syndrome my sophomore year. I had it for about 9 months. And it was really a hard time in my life because who was I without football? What was I going to do? And I really struggled during that time with depression and anxiety. See, depression is hurt held inward. Think about that. Hurt held inward. And anxiety is fear of the unknown. What was I going to do? What's my future going to look like? And so during that time, I really struggled. Thankfully, I was able to, once I got that the concussion part managed a lot better. Steve and Tanya and I, we were on the wrestling team at Lafayette, and that was very helpful to have something else. But I became an RA, I became president of Fellowship Christian Athletes, all this cool stuff to just kind of find my identity. It was during that time that I actually decided I'm not going to be an orthopedic surgeon because my grades went pretty south in biology. But I realized that God was leading me to become a sports psychologist, and everything that happened my junior year and the senior year was really about redefining who I am. And that's not something we often value or talk about within athletics. Too often we'll say, they're injured and they can't play their sport, they're done, and they're not on the team. And then we don't have the support system in place to really help that athlete transition. But as mental health is getting its day finally, we're seeing more and more people say, okay, we need to recognize that we've got to help people with this kind of transition, not just when they're injured, but also when the game is over. If you're interested in this kind of process and want more of it, there's a YouTube movie called When the Game Ends. And it's a 30-minute documentary from Princeton athletics. And when the game ends is a story. It's a Chuck DeBillio story. Actually, I have a picture over here. I'll show you. I don't know if you can see this or not. Probably not with this kind of like goofy background thing. But anyway, there's when the game ends. The story of Chuck DeBillio, the greatest running back in Ivy League history, his freshman year. He comes down with a stroke. He can't play football again. He can't return to school for a while. And they can't find out what caused the stroke. And the last third of the movie is really the story of how I helped him with his transition from football to life beyond. And it's a beautiful movie that they premiered at Princeton, and one that I think that anybody who's going through a transition would benefit from. So check out When the Game Ends.
Awesome. All right, so we have a question about technique here. So any thoughts for an individual that might be officiating or reffing? There was some advice that they were told about techniques that they could do to calm themselves down a bit. Any thought to somebody that's going to use humming or anything else to relax and focus? Is that a technique you've heard of, or anything that you might be able to provide for somebody who's refereeing, whether it's matches or games, in terms of their focus and relaxation?
All right, first off, like any referee out there, God bless you. You are a saint. And what you have to deal with the crazy parents on the sidelines is absolutely worth 2, 3, 4 times the amount of money you're getting paid, because it is so tough out there. I actually say that my generation kind of rescued sports in America, because what was so good and fun, the parents have just kind of made like so intense, and it's so hard on the referees in particular. So my heart really goes out to refs. That being said, how to like emotionally regulate ourselves when that preconscious mind is full, and the defenses, you see I'm going referencing that PowerPoint, the defenses break down, the load issues start coming up. How do we kind of manage that at that point in time? And the reality is it's different for everybody, which is why I could work one-on-one with each of you and put in different tools that are going to help you. Um, but here's just a couple quick ones that make a big difference. And yes, humming, for example, would be really, really good. Or going to your favorite song. You might start singing your favorite song in your head, and that could be a definite helper. Obviously, it all comes back to the breathing, because we've got to take our sympathetic nervous system, which is go, 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 go. You got to bring that down and get the parasympathetic, which is relax, relax, relax. You got to get that more engaged. And so when we get a little fired up, so our sympathetic is going. So if you slow down your breathing, what happens? People can follow this. You take a deep breath in, it brings the oxygen into your lungs. It mixes with the blood vessels of the lungs, so that oxygenated blood goes right to the heart. So when you're really stressed and the heart's beating so fast, but you slow down your breathing, it tricks the heart. And then the heart says, wait, we have plenty of oxygenated blood. We don't have to beat so fast, so hard. And it slows down, it brings your nervous system back in balance. And that's why the slow, deep breath is so powerful. Of course, who cares if somebody's like, take a deep breath? But when you understand the reason, then it's like, okay, that begins to make sense. But ultimately, and I know it's tough for an official, um, but if you're not an official, or you're an athlete, or maybe you're a parent or something, this is really where we've got to call a mental health break. A timeout, just to kind of like step back and take care of ourselves. And I believe that we're going to see more and more people saying, I just need to like take a mental health day from work and maybe not do this for a day, or maybe I need to step aside from the game because right now I'm about to lose it. And for an athlete to just say to their coach, like, hey, coach, I just need a break for a moment. In my day, you would never, ever be allowed to do that. But I think it's really helping and wise now. But these are just all a few quick ideas. But ultimately, what's happening when we are experiencing that kind of moment where we're going to lose it is that flooded preconscious mind. So the long-term solution is figure out the mind as best we can. Talk therapy is really great, and build the tools in the toolbox to better manage it.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so those were the questions that were in the chat. Anyone else out there that had other follow-up questions for Jarrod at this time? I just thought of another one, but anyone else? Questions, comments about the presentation? All right, well, I want to keep this conversation going for a little bit longer. I know we don't have to use the full hour if people need to run, but talking about when you were playing, and obviously many of us on this call are athletes, and that mental break that wasn't happening, right? Get back out there, suck it up. Is there now more work being done with the parents to help coach them about this than athletes? Because so many parents out there grew up doing it a certain way, and how many of them are really in tune with mental health and what they're, we're training our coaches maybe at the college level, but thinking about, a father or a mother who, is just trying to get their kid to be at the top of their game. Are you seeing more coaching that you're doing with parents than athletes at this point in time?
Yes, because it's really our generation of parents have great hearts, and their hearts are wonderful, and saying, "I want to do everything I possibly can to help my son or daughter to achieve the most they possibly can." It's that their head that's really the problem, and that's really where Mind of the Parent, the best practices for parenting today's student athletes, is one of the most popular talks I give. Um, and so that program is really a big deal. And so in that best practices program, there's a lot of things I say to parents. And here's a couple of gems for any of you that might be interested in this. Do not scar your kids emotionally anymore. And the acronym SCAR is related to this concept. The worst rated sports memory for most athletes today is the car ride home with either mom or dad after a game or practice. And that's when they have the most damage done. So what we say is, SCAR is never talk to your kid again until they're showered, changed, ate, and rested. Showered, changed, ate, and rested. Once that occurs, you can have a much more productive conversation. But unfortunately, most parents can barely contain it. They get in the car and they start saying, "Why did you do that?" And didn't you? But the kids, if they actually, and it, they should get in the car and feel emotionally depleted. That's the worst time. It's like I don't know if any of you ever come home from work and all you want to do is get in the house, get out of your work clothes, go to the bathroom, get something to eat, relax and look at your phone for 5 minutes without some kid being like, "Daddy, Mommy, oh my gosh," right? It's the same thing. And so shower, change, ate, and rested is one of the most important things that we should really focus on. Here's the second thing. What hobby do you have in common with your kids that has nothing to do with performance, outcome, achievement? And so if you don't have that, it's really important to cultivate it, but not make it competitive. So it might be like fly fishing, and we don't care who catches more fish. It might be, hey, we like to go to church together and out for breakfast together. That might be something. The idea is that for every athlete, the game's going to end at some point in time. You want to have something else you can talk about and something else that you can have in common you can do. The further an athlete goes in their journey, the last thing they want to talk about with their parents is actually performance in sport. So what is it that you can do that's, listen carefully, an outlet to let out stress? So one of the best parts of the pandemic is that it forced you and me and everyone to really cultivate hobbies. And those hobbies are ways for us to let out stress. And for kids today, they don't have a lot of outlets to let out stress besides Xbox and their phone, and electronics are not good outlets. So we've got to have a hobby that we do with our kids. So this is one of the best things I could share from Mind of Parenting. Don't scar your kids and get a hobby with your kids. Those two things can go a really long way.
That was great. Thank you. One more question here. Just you gave us a lot of great videos and movies to watch, which I obviously wrote down. Have you seen the new documentary Beyond the Gold on HBO, which talks about mental health and athletes? I believe that's the one that featured Michael Phelps. And your thoughts on that?
This is groundbreaking. It's a must see for everybody. And it's very, very important that we recognize that what Michael Phelps and others have done is they really revealed that what happens when the lights are off after Tokyo and all the athletes go home, post-Olympic depression is a really big deal because so much of their identity has been wrapped up in their sport. And quite frankly, I also think that a lot of it has to do with like some real biological depression is there, but it was kind of self-medicated with working out a ton. And when you're not working out all the time like that, and it slows down, you might realize maybe there was some real biological depression there, some genetic depression all along. And so whatever the reason may be, identity or physiology, post-Olympic depression is so significant, and the mental health of our athletes is so significant. It's one reason why I applaud Michael Phelps so much, because he's become one of the biggest advocates for mental health. And if this is the greatest, most decorated Olympian of all time saying it's okay to not be okay, hopefully that will give permission to every one of us on the Zoom here today to say, you know what, me too. It's okay. And asking for a little help, getting into some counseling, uh, reading a book, watching a YouTube video, listening to a podcast, taking a mental health break. Just give yourself a day off to just kind of like rest and recharge and recover. All of those things are really important. And I believe that HBO documentary did a great job of tearing down the stigma on mental health. So, yes, that's a must watch for everybody.
Got it. All right. So I think Erica joined a little bit late, but she just dropped a question into the chat about Naomi Osaka. So Jarrod was able to share an interview and a clip from CNN, and he talked specifically about that. Erica, no, it's not a problem at all.
I'll speak more about it because that topic is such a big deal. That there's so many different angles and ways to really come at that. Ironically, Erica, I was on the BBC last week talking about the same issue, and Patty Kay was interviewing me, and I shared that acronym about STAR, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to write that down." She's like, "I think I need to remember that one." So even the interviewers from BBC on this topic are saying, hey, look, we all can benefit from mental health advice and ideas. And so when it comes to Naomi Osaka, whom I don't know, I've never worked with her, what I do know about this situation is that it's really in my opinion, the spark that's lighting the fire for systemic change in mental health everywhere. That what we are learning from this is that it's not just Naomi, that even the people that run in the French Open are saying, you know what, yeah, maybe we probably could have handled that a little bit better, having told her that if she didn't do interviews, that she might be removed from the tournament. And I think that's what's happening everywhere. Every company, every college, every community saying, okay, what could we do differently when it comes to how we help individuals with mental health? Now, this is a massive problem at colleges because for one study that I'm aware of that came out of the American Psychological Association's magazine, The Monitor, said that for every one college student, there was 1,737, every one college counselor, there was 1,737 students. And so just do the math on that and you realize like, yeah, there's not nearly enough counselors to help these young people, especially coming out after the pandemic. We have a lot of people coming out of the pandemic saying, man, my mental health is the worst it's ever been. And so we've got to get more resources in place on college campuses. Nearly every counselor I know has got a wait list right now. And that's really a good sign in some ways, but also a bad sign that we need to have more counselors out there to meet the needs. And then listen really carefully. This post-pandemic depression is going to be a big deal for leaders. Just like if somebody's loved one dies, the person who's strongest for everybody else in the family usually is the one that crashes last. And so we want to make sure that if you were that person during the pandemic getting people through it, what's going to happen to you 3 months, 6 months, 9 months afterwards is you might feel your crash. And so mental health is going to have a significant lingering impact post-pandemic for years. And we've got to begin to prepare ourselves for what are we going to do about that. And the Naomi Osaka situation was one that really highlighted the need for systemic change everywhere on how we're going to deal with this.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we have another question, so it's good. We're keeping the conversation going. A question from James, class of 75, about some older, athletes who strive and struggle to remain very physically active. Maybe some motivational, mental thoughts there, or ways people can motivate themselves when they're struggling to keep an active lifestyle.
Yeah, for sure. We got to get creative, and I think that's a big part of it. We got to try things that we haven't tried before. I'm obviously biased, but I'm going to share a little something that I've invested in lately, which is iFit, which is a Nordic track treadmill. So if you go on a Nordic track treadmill, you can kind of like hike mountains with people and do all those things. I'm actually one of those guys that you can do that with now, because during the pandemic, they developed iFit Mind, and so I've got videos where I'm hiking mountains and talking about anxiety or depression or confidence or energy. And I think that that video series, which any one of you can get the iFit app for 30 days free, and you can just go for a walk and listen to me talk about this stuff. But I think that when it comes to exercise and being more physically active, the mental part of it is such a big deal. But what if we paired the two together so that you're actually on a walk or on the treadmill and you're listening to me speak about how to manage depression better, anxiety better, how to get things started? And I think that's what iFit NordicTrack has done a really great job during this pandemic of saying we got to combine the two together. So I think that that is one very strategic way that somebody could help get started. And what we also know is that community is really a major part of being physically active. And it's hard when we try to do it in isolation, but it's a lot easier when we do it in community. And so, okay, well, I mentioned pickleball earlier. That's fun. And when you're out with other people and everyone's just trying to learn a new sport together, that community that develops is really what I'm talking about. So, two quick things would be one, how do we find that community, aka pickleball? Let's try that. And two, maybe it's the iFit app where it's pairing. I'm going to go for a walk today that is paired with mental health, and that might be the way to kind of jumpstart to be more active.
Great. I think Dr. Childs is also a fan of pickleball, if I remember. So I think there's a community there for sure. Maybe it's got something to do with all of you that are much smarter than I am. So
follow-on question.
Yeah.
To that. Back at Lafayette, I was a distance runner, and now I'm, for the last 10 years, been back into it again, trying to be competitive in my age group. COVID really shut things down, but fortunately, I've been, for the most part, been able to run at least with one other person a lot of the time. But now, for a long time, there's been no races. It's hard to get motivated if you're a distance runner and there's no races. It'll be 2 years before I'm back running my favorite 10-mile race, and it's just incredibly hard to keep that motivation going.
Yeah, I feel for you in that situation, and quite frankly, I mean, it's a significant loss, because those individuals that race, and especially have a community of racers, you really feel that absence. And so my heart really goes out to you regarding that. But in some strange, odd way, I also think for those individuals that lost something like that and weren't able to do it, I actually think that the break may make you come back stronger and better than ever, because that intrinsic drive, that fire inside of you, the love of the game, the love of the sport, love of the race, is probably stronger. And once you get that first taste of it again, I think it's really gonna like empower you for like the next 10 years to be like, all right, I'm so appreciative. Let me explain why this is a big deal. The number one emotion for peak performance is excitement. The more you're excited about running the next race or doing whatever it is you're going to do, the better you perform. But how do we get more excitement? Well, it's really through the attitude of gratitude. And the more grateful you are for anything, the more excited you become. And the pandemic has made us so grateful just to be able to go out to a restaurant again, So we're more excited about that. Or to be able to run a race, or go to a home Lafayette football game in the fall. It's like, okay, this is going to be exciting. Like, we're going to be more excited, so we're going to perform better. And so I would say that given the situation where we find ourselves today, which is our world starting to open up a little bit more, cultivate the attitude of gratitude with that. That's going to lead to the excitement. That's going to lead to better performance, which is going to lead to longevity in the physical exercise again.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you, James. And I'm going to put a plug in here during reunion, if you'd like. We're doing a spot trot 5K. So you can run a 5K, print out your bib, and submit your time, and let us know, and maybe upload a picture as well. So there's a competitive race component for you as a part of reunion that you can participate in.
Be there next reunion at 8 o'clock in the morning for the alumni run. Every year I'm there.
Great. Well, this is our way of doing the alumni run virtually. So,
But the virtual race is just not the same.
nope, it's not. We agree, no doubt. But still, if you'd like, please participate. Okay, so we are coming up on the hour. I have looked through most of the questions via the chat, and we've answered those. But before we run out of time, I just want to do one last call for questions, if folks have them, to come off mute and ask them. Otherwise, we can make sure that we get you to your next session or onto your next meeting if you're doing reunion and working today. So
One question.
Sure.
If you safen the sport, like from rugby to touch rugby, would that have a major effect on the psychological after effects, one way or the other?
Yeah, great point. And I don't think there are certain sports like rugby that when you go from tackle to touch like that, it really works out so well. Some sports, if the individual has learned the timing of a tackle, of a hit, it's very difficult to kind of reverse that. So if you see somebody who played tackle football and then they go play flag football, there's sometimes a real danger and threat out there on the field, because timing instinctually is like very different for those two kind of sports. So I think that it is best to keep some sports like the way they are, like football and rugby, and flag football is great, but when you go from tackle to flag, it could be challenging. I say that might be the case from rugby to touch rugby. That might be somewhere in that way as well. So having played a little rugby at Westchester University after my Lafayette days, I definitely love that sport, and would say let's leave that one alone as best we can. But I'm open to healthy ways to adapt anything. So if there's a better way to do it, maybe we should do that too.
Thank you.
Okay. So one quick announcement. Thanks to Ben for putting the reunion programming into the chat, along with the spot trot that we mentioned. For those who are planning to participate in the social justice on social media event this afternoon at 1, we just want to make you aware that this session has been moved to tomorrow, Wednesday at 1 p.m. So with that, just want to thank again Jarrod for joining us today. This was really a lot of fun. Wrote down a lot of films and hopefully some tips to work on my golf game before I transition over to pickleball if that doesn't work out. But again, thanks for the great conversation, Jarrod. We really appreciate you joining us for our virtual reunion. And again, we look forward to hopefully seeing everybody in person for reunion next year. And obviously, as Jarrod said, back on campus for a football game in the fall as we return to a more normal way of running things at the college. So thanks to everyone. Really appreciate it. And as always, go Leopards.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. All the best to you.